All right, let's dive into a really wild story from the world of international finance. It's a bit of a cautionary tale, really, about how Russia managed to sell billions of dollars worth of oil to India only to get stuck with a massive fortune that it literally couldn't spend.
I mean, this code just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures how absurd the whole situation got. Imagine making the biggest sale of your life, but your payment is basically store credit that's only good in one single place. This one idea is the key to understanding Russia's giant financial headache.
So let's talk about the number at the heart of all this. We are talking about $30 billion. That's the amount in Indian rupees that was reportedly just stranded in Russian bank accounts. It's a mind-boggling amount of money that became an equally mind-boggling problem. So, the big question is, how on earth does this happen? How does a $30 billion payday, a huge windfall, suddenly turn into a massive liability? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down. And it all started with a plan that seemed pretty clever at the time.
You know, on paper, the idea made a ton of sense. You've got Russia dealing with all these sanctions, needing new buyers for its oil. And you've got India, a massive country that needs a lot of energy. So they cooked up a deal. Russia sells the oil and India pays for it in its own currency, the rupee. The goal was to just sidestep the US dollar and the whole Western banking system. Simple enough, right?
Well, as it turns out, not so simple. The whole financial engine they built to make this happen just completely seized up. And this is what brings us to what some have called the Vostro account graveyard, a place where these good financial intentions just went to die.
Okay, so the first major reason this whole plan cracked was the trade relationship itself. From the very beginning, it was just completely lopsided.
Now, to get this, we have to quickly talk about something called a Vostro account. Don't worry, it sounds more complicated than it is. Just think of it like this. An Indian bank holds a special account for a Russian bank, and that account is filled with nothing but rupees. So when India buys oil, it just deposits the rupees in there. And the idea was that Russia could then use those rupees to buy Indian stuff. It's meant to be a nice, simple, two-way street.
But here was the problem, and this chart shows it perfectly. This wasn't a two-way street at all. It was a one-way superhighway. I mean, look at that. The value of oil Russia was sending to India was absolutely enormous, while the stuff India was selling back to Russia was just a tiny trickle in comparison.
And that's really the first part of the trap. Russia was shipping mountains of oil, and billions of rupees were just flooding into those special accounts. But Russia wasn't buying anywhere near enough from India to actually spend it all. So what happened? You got this gigantic and growing pile of cash that was just sitting there.
But that trade imbalance, that was only half the problem. The other, and maybe even more critical issue, was about the currency itself. Put simply, a rupee is just not a dollar.
And here's why that matters so much. A convertible currency, like the US dollar, is accepted all over the world. You can exchange it pretty much anywhere. But a non-convertible currency, like the Indian rupee, has a lot of restrictions. It's really meant to be used inside its home country.
And this brings us to another perfect analogy: monopoly money. For Russia, those billions in rupees basically became a giant pile of colorful paper that was only valuable on one specific game board, and that board was the Indian economy. Outside of India, it was almost useless to them.
So okay, let's say you're Russia. You now have a $30 billion problem on your hands. The money's piling up, you can't really spend it where you want to. What do you do? Well, this started a desperate search for a way out of the rupee trap.
Before I tell you what they did, just think about it for a second. If you had that kind of money locked away in another country, what would your strategy be? Would you just buy a ton of physical goods? Try to invest it? The options, it turns out, are surprisingly limited.
In the end, Russia's solution was basically just to pull the emergency brake, hard. They reportedly just stopped taking rupees for their oil. Instead, they started demanding payment in other currencies that were easier to use internationally, pivoting to things like the UAE dirham and the Chinese yuan.
So after all that, what's the big takeaway here? This whole mess is really a masterclass in the dangers of trying to build new financial systems outside of the traditional ones. It's a real lesson in economic survival.
And that really gets to the moral of this whole $30 billion story. In today's world, it's not just enough to sell your stuff. You have to get paid in a currency that's alive, one that can move around the globe, one that has a pulse. Because if you don't, you might just find yourself incredibly rich, but only in-store credit to a mall you don't even want to shop at.